Well, thank you all for coming tonight. For those that don't know me, I am Dave Bennett. I'm the Public Works Director, City Engineer here at the City of Northfield. I'd like to introduce a few of my staff and colleagues that are here. Sean Simonson is our Engineering Manager here. Jacob Ives in the back is our Graduate Engineer. We also have Jason Malika with Bolton and Mink here. He's coordinating our 2026 project, so we'll be able to answer questions related to those projects when we break after the presentation. So when you came in, you were given a notepad for questions that you may have. So we really want those questions to focus on general transportation, safety, items like project year specific. We can handle that out in the open house. So it's about a 25-minute presentation. We'll do 15, 20 minutes of questions. And then we'll go out and then, we can answer all your general questions out there too, but I think from a time perspective, it's project specific. We'll handle those questions out by the maps and the project years. So just an overview tonight. So we're going to talk about what we're doing in terms of safe transportation planning and our really approach here at the city and how we're really planning out of our projects. We'll run through how decisions are made, how projects are getting into the program and into the capital improvement plan. We'll go through what's on the horizon, so I'll do a high-level overview of the 2025 to 2029 program projects that are currently in the capital improvement plan. And then after we get through that, we'll do the general 15 to 20 minutes of questions, and then we'll move out into the lower cafeteria, and staff will be out there able to answer any of your general questions that you may have. I'm not going to read all this, but I just want to share the city's vision, mission, and values. So I think this really hits home really within our comprehensive plan, our transportation plan, and really what we're trying to achieve here at the city. So when we think of transportation planning, we're really thinking holistically about a balanced roadway network. We're thinking complete streets, and we're really thinking about safety, really safety of all roadway users. So when we're planning our projects, safety is really at the highest level in terms of a priority. So we're planning for access, mobility. Where are the destinations? Where do people want to go? How are they going to get there by automobile? Are they going to get there walking, biking? Are they busing there? So we're really taking a holistic approach on how people are getting around and how do we make sure they're getting around the community safely. And really why we're doing that. So this isn't all the state crashes, but these are the serious and fatal crashes in the state over the last 10 years. So 18,000 lives lost or somebody seriously injured in a crash. And then if we kind of hone in and now we look at Rice County, so 7,800 crashes, 253 of those are serious and fatal. So certainly that's a lot of crashes. We know from the statistics that we've had a downward trend in fatalities and serious crashes until COVID hit, and now we're back on the rise. So our roads aren't as safe as what they were, so safety is very important, and when we're planning and we're programming, we're thinking about safety. And then when we get into Northfield, when we think of Northfield, over the last 10 years, a little over 900 crashes, 28 of those are serious and fatal crashes, so 23 serious crashes, personal injuries, 5 fatal crashes in the last 10 years, so we're on average, about 3 serious and fatal crashes in our community per year. Then if we dig down into those numbers and we look at, pedestrian and bikes, so 28 pedestrian accidents in the last 10 years, 21 bike accidents. So on average, we're averaging 5 accidents of peds and bikes per year in the city. So we need to do better than that. So when we're thinking and we're looking forward, we want to. Safety is important. How do we plan the network, and what are some of the the tools and the techniques that are being used so that we have a safe system out there. So for many years, there's been a focus, it's TZD towards zero death. And now really where we're seeing is it's a transition to a safe system approach. So it's kind of a new paradigm under the safe system approach where, before under TZD, enforcement, engineering, your emergency vehicles responding, and really everybody is in there working with your schools. And I think now with the safe system approach, we know that people are human beings. We know that they make mistakes. How do we plan and build a roadway network, understanding that there could be mistakes on the roadway system? It's really a shared responsibility between the city and really all roadway users, whether you're in an automobile, on a bike or walking, on a scooter, or if you're on a bus. So this illustration, really on the left here is your fatalities and risk index, and your bottom is your speed in miles per hour. So if an automobile hits a pedestrian, as you get above 20 miles per hour, there's 9 times out of 10, you're probably gonna not make it through if you get hit by a vehicle. Certainly, an automobile hits a tree or an object, you can see the speeds and fatality risk, and then side impacts and head-on. So, and that is important when we think of the roadway design and then the roadway network. I think we're fortunate in Northfield that we have a lot of roads that are 30 miles per hour neighborhood roads. We do not have many high-speed roadways in our community. There certainly are some, and along Highway 3 with the speeds, and if I could jump back to that map, you'll see a lot of those red dots where all those accidents are clustered on Highway 3 and Highway 19. Again, getting at speed and why it's important, and it gets to really the other users of the roadway. We know when speeds are lower for drivers, if they're driving 20 miles per hour, they're yielding for people 75% of the time. So yield rates are high. We know as vehicle speeds increase, get above 30 miles per hour, the yield rates drop significantly down. We do know that we've been adding pedestrian flashers around the community, and those really have high yield rates. So certainly there's times in vehicles they may not stop, but we know we're making improvements on those key crossing locations where we really need to think about advancing the type of infrastructure that's there for warning and pedestrian safety. Well, when we talk about safety and fatalities, and then we think about the last few years and maybe what's in the program and what we've been doing, we know humans make mistakes. So what are some of the safety things? We're separating bikes and vehicles. We added a raised crossing on Heritage, more visible. We've narrowed roads, narrowed crossings for a visibility, so a driver can see a pedestrian in the crosswalk. The crosswalk distance is shorter. So for example, we received a grant to do the emergency vehicle preemption on the traffic signals on Highway 3, so we received a grant for that. But we also did an LED conversion on the traffic signals, because we know that Highway 3 is a big pedestrian barrier in the community, and as part of that, we did a thorough review of the lighting of the crosswalks there, and we knew that we had some areas that weren't lit very well, and as part of that project, there was lights that were added on the crosswalks on Highway 3. So sometimes you may not see it or notice it. Obviously, a lot of people see the bump outs, they see the curb, they see the bike lanes, but there's other smaller improvements that we're doing that also focus on improving pedestrian safety in the community. Prior to the 2023 bikeway improvement project, we did before pedestrian and bike counts. And then in 2024, after the bike facilities were built, we did post counts. They're done by video and they're counted. So I think what it shows is we've had 4 times to 10 time increases in bikes on those facilities after those facilities have been built. So we're seeing really tremendous growth in usage in those facilities. For example, Roosevelt Drive, there was 22 bikes on that in 2023, and there were over 90 bikes on that new bikeway that's protected in 2024. It's not only about streets, but it's really about, you know, our water quality and really a holistic approach to our transportation planning. We do need to manage our stormwater. We have limits on how much nutrients we are allowed to discharge into the river, whether that's through reducing impervious surfaces, adding a tree canopy in areas where our urban forest is not very strong, whether that's infiltration or filtration practices that we're adding throughout the design and the right-of-way. So as part of these projects, there's not only just the street improvement, but there's the other improvements related to improving water quality for our community. So just a little bit on this, you know, our department in Public Works. So there's over 75 miles, centerline miles of streets in the community. So we really want to be thoughtful and planful about the resources we have to try to keep these systems in decent shape in doing that. So we typically, you know, there's a variety of approaches, whether it's from pothole patching to larger patches. You'll see crack seals and seal coat projects going on in the community. You'll see more of the larger capital projects that are going on. So those would be your mill and overlays, your street reclamations, or your full reconstructions. And along with that, we also have sidewalk and curb repairs to fix drainage. So there's a wide variety of tools that we're using to maintain the system, and certainly there's a cost to that to keep that maintenance up. So this is a graph that it's a little bit tough to read, but I'll walk through it. So the blue line is really the input, conversation, community feedback, really about projects. And then when you follow the blue line to the right, so we're going to be building a project in 25. So we're going to be bidding that project. It's going to start. So really the final plans are pretty well getting wrapped up on that project. So there's not going to be really that many changes to the 2025 project, and I'll show that on this chart a little bit later. And then the bottom line is, the green line is, so you know, as you make more and more changes closer to construction, the cost of those changes can go up. So I think we're here tonight. It's a new meeting, and we really want to hear from people to get their feedback. It's a collaborative opportunity for you to weigh in and think about how we plan the future of our network and how we improve safety on our corridor. And we're going to take those things to heart and really try to look at ways we can do that and think about programming and planning those. So your feedback is really important here tonight. There's comment cards out on the table too if they're not part of the general discussion Q&A, but we certainly value your input. So, you know, how do we really make the plan, the 5-year plan, and really we're looking at. So at a high level, we do rate the conditions of the pavement. We do about a quarter of the city every year. The city, you know, it's about a 74 pavement condition index. So we rate the city. That doesn't mean we don't have some streets that, so that's like a C, right? If you have your grade level 70%, you got your C. So we're kind of in the middle of the C range. We have bad streets that are failing. Those are down in the 20s and 30s. We do have some of those streets, but we also have streets that are newer, that are in the 90s to 100. So collectively, you know, one of the things that we want to make sure that the council is informed if we're seeing a trend where we're seeing continued downgrade of our pavement condition and our roadways continue to deteriorate. Doesn't mean that all of our bad streets are going to go away, but we want to be aware that if we're seeing our system start to slide in terms of overall managing and taking care of it. We have not seen that yet. The council has invested into the streets, whether it's through seal coats, mill and overlays, reclamation, reconstruction. So we've been continuing being able to maintain our systems. Through that, though, we also have safety, walking, and biking. So all that stuff is getting folded into these projects. A lot of that is through input. We had a 2018 update to our walking and biking system plan. We received input from the community on that. We look at that plan as part of our planning process to incorporate projects. And I think one thing, you know, even with the 2018 plan, one thing when we did our Park and Rec study, really it was a capital study for Park and Recreation. Probably the most engagement that we received here at the city, we had over 1,000 response and engaged community members on our Park and Rec system. And the most walking and biking was the highest activity that this community indicated on those surveys. So certainly we have a very active community. Walking and biking are very important, and we heard that through that Park and Rec study, that's important, and really that helps tie back to our walking and biking network plan and really trying to fill in the gaps and make connections and build that out. Certainly as part of the process, I think one thing too, in 2021, I think it was a really a great move by the city council to move away from street assessments where you had large costs that would be assessed to individual property owners, and that was replaced with franchise fees really to offset that street assessment revenue. Now one thing that does happen with that is, you know, we get a few more calls saying, when is my street going to be done? When is my street going to be getting programmed? But certainly it's a balance, and we got to be mindful of the funds that we have available to build the network. So this is just a high-level timeline. So I talked about it, and I'll show it again on the chart. So really, the 2025 project, we're finaling plans. We're going to be bidding that, and that's going to be starting in the spring. Like I said, we have Jason here. We're already starting on the 2026 project. We're doing the preliminary feasibility report and estimating that, and then we'll be getting into the plans for that. And really 27, 28, and 29, we've identified what we think the scope of those projects are and what should be programmed. But we really haven't got into the details. We've reviewed our plans related to walking and biking, identified things that should be pulled in from those plans, but certainly on all the projects, we do want to hear from the community to make sure that we're doing the right project for the community. So again, if you go back to this chart, you know, at the beginning, you know, we have the comprehensive plan. We have a transportation plan. The 2040 plan really builds off the 2008 plan. And then we have our capital improvement plan. So really, the further years out, the 27 through 29 projects, we're not really in depth on the final design on those projects. So really a lot of influence on those projects if we think those should change or if we don't think the scoping of that is right. You know, 2026, we're really, you know, we really want to get feedback now. So if you have specific things, on the 2026 project, we'll want to hear that information. We want to make sure we have that project scoped correctly and what's included. And really 2025, you know, we're in the final plans, like I said, and that project's going to be going out for bid. So that project is really wrapping up. There's really less engagement from the community at this point, because those plans are really wrapping up at this time. I'm going to walk through the 2025 to 2029 projects at a high level. So on this map is either planned projects. I see the 24 project might not have come off here yet on this map, but really what's in the works really in the next 5 years. There's a lot of work going on. I think one thing that I would want to highlight too, even when we think back to the roundabout at 246 and Jefferson Parkway, and we think of the grants, the city's received almost $14 million in grants towards really our transportation network, so really to help advance walking and biking, improving intersections. So really just to highlight all the additional investment that is being made into the community. The 2025 project, it's a combination of pavement reclamation, an off-street trail, pedestrian crossing improvements, and mill and overlay. We do have the maps out on the boards, and I'll just quickly walk through the area. So on your left would be Industrial Drive, so that's out by Cardinal Glass. That's our street reclamation project. So street reclamation, well, what does that mean? So that we grind up all the asphalt pavement, we pretty much make a new base for the road, and we repave the entire roadway is a reclamation project. We have that same thing planned on Laurel Court, kind of the entry into Seckler Park, along with a trail off of Highway 19 to connect into the Milltowns Trail that runs into Seckler. And then I'll talk about in 27 with the Highway 19 project that the state's doing. They're going to have a trail, 2 trails on the north and south side of Highway 19 that'll tie into that trail. On your right here, we have a mill and overlay of Maple Street. There'll be a new trail along the west side of Maple Street, along the soccer complex that would connect into the existing trail to the south. And we also have Superior Drive and Lake Drive overlays. The circles on the map, so those are ped crossing improvements. So like one of the things that we ask the community at the meetings is, do we have the crossing location, and where we're looking at improving a crossing in the right spot? Is that where people are crossing? You live in the neighborhood, what are you experiencing? So it's good to get feedback on that. And then the other crossing is kind of between a couple ponds where some trails are at. (2026) similar. This also has a segment of the Milltown State Trail being built with this project. The city did receive over $8 million from the state, and then where the city is contributing about $3.5 million. So it's about $11.5 million investment into the Milltown State Trail in the community. The first segment you may have seen get built this year, so that was the segment along Highway 3 to Riverside Park, and then Jefferson Parkway out to Highway 3, so that trail segment was built this year, so that was the first phase of that project. So this project includes a mill and overlay at Jefferson Parkway. The yellow dots are crossing improvements along Jefferson Parkway to improve the access from the north to the south. Maple Street will also be overlaid with the project. The Prairie Street bikeway that's striped right now is planned to be protected and the curb added in 2026. There's the blue line is a sidewalk segment to be added by Leah Drive on Prairie Street. And then the red line is Milltown State Trail. So that's kind of the third phase of it. So 2025, we're planning on Milltown's Trail from Woodley Street to the Waterford Bridge would be built in 25. In addition, it's not on this map, sorry about that, in 26, we also have Spring Creek Road, which is the gravel section just south of Woodley to Huron Court. That's going to be a paved segment, so that road will be reconstructed in 2026. 2027, a combination of reclamation, mill and overlay. We have intersection and trail improvements. I think this one will probably be the biggest stressor for the community because this is Highway 19. This is really a MnDOT-led project. So Highway 19, so from Interstate 35 to Highway 3, they're going to do a mill and overlay, but the segment from Armstrong Road to the railroad tracks, that's going to be a full regrade, so that's kind of like some of the curbs going to be removed and replaced, so that's kind of like almost like a modified reconstruction project. So there are definitely going to be some traffic challenges and headaches with that. It'll also include, based on funding, if it comes through, would be a roundabout at County Road 78 or Armstrong Road and Highway 19. In addition, with that project, the crossings at Post will be improved and updated. That may actually happen the year prior, but that is currently in the works too with that project. In addition, there's up by the hospital, we have a reclamation of North Avenue and Eves Avenue, and also out on Spring Creek Road, kind of along the Mayflower Hill and the golf course area. That is also a pavement reclamation project. 2028, we have pavement reclamation, sidewalk, road reconstruction, some intersection improvements and bikeway improvements, and I'll walk through those here on the map. So probably it'll be a joint project with the county on County Road 78, Armstrong Road, so that would be probably a reclamation and then a recon, kind of as you move south towards Dundas, that road would be reconstructed. There'll be a trail added on really from, if the roundabout goes in at Armstrong Road and Highway 19, but even if it doesn't, there'll be a trail added that'll connect into the Seckler Park Trail at that entrance, and it'll also hook up with the Milltown State Trail. In addition, we have Jefferson Lane, Jefferson Road reclamation projects in Archibald Street area. 4th Street would be planned to have the striped bikeway protected in 2028. Might have to advance, oh, there we go, 2029. This is mill and overlay and sidewalk improvements, and we can walk through those areas here. If you could advance in the back. So we have Greenville Avenue, mill and overlay. It'll be a couple segments of Jefferson Road, so just south of Woodley to Jefferson Parkway, and then down by Heritage and Honey Locust, those are also planned for mill and overlay. We also have Spring Street, Spring Street here, and then the Constitutional Drive area right just west of the high school is also planned for mill and overlay. In addition to the street projects, I mean, Bridge Square, there's a lot of streets around Bridge Square that are in bad shape, so that was potentially planned to be a 2025 project. It's been pushed out. We'll be working with the new council on what year it actually gets programmed, but it's got approval from the State Historic Preservation Office with its historic district. It has been approved by the Heritage Preservation Commission in terms of certificate of appropriateness. So attached is the plan. The plan really was over 10 years old in 2014. There was concept plans and a final plan document of different options that were created. In 2022, we dusted that off. We did engagement. We met with a lot of the users that use the square, whether it's DJJD, the Riverwalk Market Fair, the businesses around, to really hone in on really what we think that final plan should look like. It was very important that Water Street remained. So Water Street It'll be closed to through traffic, but it'll be available for events. And it really separates the plaza from the park area, so that was important from a historical perspective. The orange circles on there are art sculptures, and then really the fountain and the Civil War monument are remaining in their current location. So with that, we're really wrapping up the presentation. So we did hand out at the beginning some notepads. If you have specific questions that you would like us to answer, if you could write your questions down, and then if you could pass them to the aisles, we'll have staff walk down, and then we'll run through and do a general Q&A, and we'll read through those questions and answer them for you. And then after the 15 to 20 minutes of questions, we'll go out into the lower cafeteria, and we'll be around to answer any questions you have on the projects or general questions too. I could take the first one out already, but it's unrelated. The question was, when will the dam be removed? I would say we've gone through the feasibility study. We have council has authorized staff to work with Post to really go through the next steps in the ownership transfer, and really working through seeking funding to go through the removal. I would say the earliest would be 5 years out from an environmental perspective and permitting and going through that based on funding, but there's many steps ahead on that, and we'll keep the community informed as things continue to progress on that.
Okay, so as Dave had mentioned, I'm going to filter through some of these. I'm giving Jacob the ones that are project specific. Again, if we don't answer them here, please ask them out there. If it's specific to a project, we're going to concentrate on general questions for this question and answer session. Here's a question: are all these projects paid for via franchise fees or tax levy?
It's a good question. So there's a combination. So one is the tax levy, one is franchise fees. The city also, through the gas tax, receives state aid dollars, so we receive money through state aid. There's also grants, and then if there's any utilities or anything related to the project, a lot of times those are all funded through the utility fund. So tax levy, municipal state aid through the gas tax, franchise fees, is the levy. So if we issue debt, that really comes through the levy, so it's really kind of the same thing from a funding perspective.
All right, next question. While it was shown on part of your first slide of projects, you never mentioned Woodley Street, Division Street, Highway 246 project in your yearly discussion. What is happening there?
So we've been through a really the planning process with that project. Certainly, we're open to more feedback, but we preliminarily went through and we scoped out what we believe what the corridor improvements need to be. So and it's under the state's jurisdiction. The state wants to turn back 246. They do not want to own Trunk Highway 246 anymore. So we are working with them on a turn back to the city. So the city would take over the segment from County Road 1 all the way out to Highway 3. We have our corridor plan. We know what the costs are to make the improvements on that, and we're working through the state on that process. So there would be an agreement with the state, and certainly we'd have to go through that. There's a funding component with that. We know that some of the sewer and water and lead water services that we know, like they're not going to fund that. That's all going to have to be paid for by our utilities. But so we know we're going to have local costs that we would already have had on 246. But we're working on funding from the state to transfer that to the city. If the state it goes to the state legislature this session. So if it goes through this session and it's approved, then we'd be working on the agreement. So probably the earliest, if everything went well, would probably be 27 or 28 construction on Highway 246. First segment it's phased out would probably be from Highway 3 to the high school entrance.
All right, how do you gather day-to-day bread and butter information besides these meetings?
I would just say it's just conversations with the community or out into the public. We hear things, people send stuff in. We do have specific focus meetings that are, whether it's for our walking and biking network or if it's related to our comprehensive planning. So those are, I'd just say, engagement, being around the community and listening. I think this is a really a good step forward and listening to the community more on a broader horizon. So we're still going to do them. You're going to be getting, if you're on the 25 or 26 projects, you're going to be getting notice about meetings that are going to be coming up that are more neighborhood specific. So there's going to be more engagement related to those projects, but we also want to get broader community input too, and this is a good step forward, I think, in that tonight.
Is the current franchise fee via our Excel bill adequate to pay for improvements? Do you foresee an increase with the franchise fees?
Yeah, so the city, when we adopted them, we thought every 3 to 5 years we would review those and look at increases, understanding what's going on with construction inflation, value increases on property. So we are looking at modifying what those fees are. So we are looking at some adjustments in those franchise fees, and that would probably occur in 2025. And then we'd probably look again in another 3 to 5 years again in the future.
Do you have a cost of the Bridge Square project?
Bridge Square is about $8 million. The city did, in December, submit a local binding request for 50% of that funding. So,
is MnDOT considering a roundabout at the 19 and 3 intersection?
At Highway, no, they're not. So as part of their conceptual planning, they had there was a double peanut type layout of a roundabout there, but certainly it's not planned or programmed with their 2027 project, and I really don't see that I don't know if that would work there either, but there's not one planned.
What is the cost difference between a mill and overlay, a reclamation, and a reconstruction, I think it says?
That's a good question. So, and I might lean on Sean. So, I think that'd be something that we could put up. I'm gonna maybe say it in 25%. So like a mill and overlay is probably like 25% of the reclamation cost. And, you know, so maybe maybe I'll step back and I'll say, to do a mile of roadway, they thought probably before COVID you could do it for $4 million. It's probably more, over $8 million, $8 million a mile to do a full reconstruction of a mile of roadway. A mill and overlay is probably 25% of that cost to do a mile, just on general mill and overlay. Certainly in the city versus out in the rural, where it's even cheaper out in the rural, where you just have ditches and that sort of stuff. And a reclamation is probably half to 60% of the cost of a full reconstruction.
Right, and just to add on to that, you know, when we do mill and overlays, we get a lot of questions on, you know, you guys just reconstructed this street, you know, 15, 20 years ago. Why are you doing it again? Well, when the pavement gets distressed to a point, if it gets too far, we can't do a mill and overlay. And again, there's some boards out there that explain a mill and overlay versus what a pavement reclamation is. A mill and overlay, if we get that road in a sweet spot where it's salvageable by spending, you know, 50% of the dollar on that for just grinding off 2 inches and putting 2 inches of asphalt on, and prolonging that surface for another 10 to 15 years, that's the process we would like to handle. Once a road gets too far, where a mill and overlay is just not feasible, because you don't want to throw, you know, good money after bad, because you're not going to be fixing the problem as a whole. Then it gets to that reclamation where you have to do, as Dave mentioned before, and again, there's boards out there explaining the reclamation, where now you're grinding up the entire asphalt surface and some of the gravel underneath, and now you're paving 2 lifts of asphalt versus 1. So the process that the city utilizes is taking some of them roads at that intermediate deterioration and bringing them back up to, you know, Dave had talked about our PCI conditions before. Is, you know, that road might be down to a 70. Now we can pave it and bring it back up to 100 with just a mill and overlay. Versus, you know, when it gets down into that 60 or below, now you're spending double the amount of money, because you're putting double the amount of product back on the road to get it back to the same thing you could have did 10 years prior.
In general, our roads, we're looking for 50 to 60 years on a life, with a mill and overlay like midway, so 20, 25 years. So we're trying to, you know, on lower volume roads, maybe we can get to 75 years. There's not been many roads that have made it to 75 years without, you know, getting to the reclamation or reconstruction type phase. But certainly the 50-year target is, I think, something that's really achievable in our community and our network, as long as we're staying proactive on the maintenance.
All right, so a lot of the questions we did get are project specific. I encourage you to please, when we break out here, to go to that project on the board out there and talk to one of the staff members that will be here to talk about that, so we can get your question answered.
Is that any other?
No, that's all I have that were general questions about the presentation.
All right. Does that sound right out here? Is most of those project specific, or is there any general? Otherwise, if all the projects were 24 million in total. No, so we received, so like over the last 5 years, we received about $14 million in grants. I have the capital plan is online. I can share the cost for every year, what's planned for the street improvements each year. Yep, go ahead.
Mine's pretty general, and I'm sorry it wasn't legible. I'm an avid biker, and the bike lanes, you've probably heard this many times, are so inconsistent. The drivers get confused, especially when there's been some snowfall and there's no barrier. And they don't know which side of the road the bikers are going to be on, so I find I'm heading right into cars. Not often, but enough that it actually scares me. And I wonder if we go forward on all these fronts, with all the roads we're doing all these things to, if we're trying to get a little more consistency there, so that us bikers can
That's it. Wait, yeah, yeah. So I think the question is, there's a lot of confusion with where the bikes are going and the consistency with the motorists, and there's some confusion out there and where they're supposed to be. We've heard that. I think we do want to have really consistent bikeways built throughout the community, connected, complete, and consistent. I think it's going to take some time to get there. I think we went through Washington Street that did get removed from the 2025 project. I do see us doing some sort of more engagement with the community really around the biking. I think we want all ages and abilities, so we want more people out there biking. We want to serve a broader user group. And then we just want to, look at these roadways to make sure that, do we have it planned right, and how do we keep it connected, complete, consistent, so we address the concerns that we're hearing in the community. So, yeah, go ahead.
As kind of a follow-up to that, is it possible to take the master trail plan for bikes and pedestrians and overlay that transparency on top of your annual improvements, so we can see how the annual projects are supporting the master trail plan?
So the question was, can you take the walking and biking network plan, and then can you overlay it onto our project plans to see how things are being incrementally improved over time? And I think that something that we can look at and see how we can communicate that. I think that's something that's we could look at here at the city. Go ahead.
I may have missed it on the 2029 map, but when is it projected to be done, the Jefferson Parkway to Jefferson Parkway connector? Off of, around Woodley Street, east, the wetlands. When is that projected?
Yeah, so that's not programmed. That's really development driven. So that would be kind of where our Hall Avenue water tower is. So the question was, when is Jefferson Parkway going to connect to Woodley Street? That project is not programmed yet. That would be development driven. We are building a water treatment plant, so a portion of Jefferson Parkway will be extended to the east, but it's not going to go far enough where it connects back up to Woodley Street, and that would be really tied to development of that land out there. Okay. Go ahead. In the orange here.
Quite a few residents got notifications about electric pipes in the city, and if they dig up the water lines, it's going to cause street closures, I assume. Is it documented anywhere when Northfield stopped using lead pipes?
So the question is, lead water services, is it documented when the city stopped using lead water service pipes? It was really probably around the mid-60s is what we think. Our water department is been working with homeowners to try to, we got a good response on the initial kind of looking back at our data. When did all the copper piping go in? So we think we know when that is. There's the time in the 60s and before that there's some verification that needs to be done. So really over the winter, if your service hasn't been known, now one, it's not only, it's the service in the street and kind of where your shutoff is in your yard all the way into the house. We need to know both sides. So if one side we can verify, we need to make sure we have records too on like what's in the city side too to make sure it's not lead. So you'll be hearing from our utilities department if you didn't know, but certainly we will be having projects due to that. Now fortunately there is some grant funding that is coming through the state for that. So our 2024 project, we did have lead water services on that. We've applied for those grants, so we're hoping that those funds come through so that those homeowners don't have to pay for the replacement of those lead water services. And with those projects, if you are in a project, we'll coordinate that with you. But we've been trying to secure the outside funding to help pay for that work. It goes all the way into your house, all the way to your water meter. So when we do the service replacement. Go ahead here.
Yeah, it still takes into account the number of serious crashes and fatalities in the city. Do we have data on the speeds at which those crashes occurred? And related question, has there been any consideration of lowering the speed limit to 25 citywide or even 20 in the downtown area?
So the question was on the number of serious and fatal crashes within the city. Do we know what the speeds were related to those crashes? And then has the city considered looking at reducing the speed limit to 25 or 20? So at this time, we have not looked at. So the state law changed where cities can now implement a reduced speed limit on their roadways within their community that are under the city's jurisdiction, not the state highways or county roadways. So you can go below 30 to 25 to 20. We have not done that. That's a good comment. I think that's something that could be looked into more related to the speeds and the crashes, and maybe something to consider for this community.
I'd like to second looking into that. That would be pretty cool if we could lower the speed limits downtown especially.
Okay. All right. Any? Yep. Go ahead.
Just a point of clarification, did I understand on Roosevelt bike path that there was 90 bikes used that in a year?
That was in a day. So the question was how many bikes used Roosevelt and the new bikeway, so that was 90 in one day. Any other general question? Otherwise, we'll, okay, in the back here. Yeah, the blue stocking, yeah.
I'll try to enunciate. So, for me, it's a big concern about cost per mile of roadway. Honestly, I was shocked at how much the road construction cost has gone up over COVID. Last I heard, it was $1 million. Now it's shocking to me. But I know there's a lot of municipalities out there that have done creative things with bike lanes and reducing the amount of pavement, reduce their cost per mile to pave a road, and of course reduce the cost to their constituents. Do you know if Northfield has any plans in place to reduce the amount of pavement square footage, and also any plans to maybe kind of account the cost per mile of setting like a bike lane? I think most of us know it's a lot cheaper than the cost for a truck lane or a car lane, or anything to reduce the cost per car.
So I'm going to try to repeat the question. So I think really the question was surprised at how much the cost of construction is per mile. Is this city looking at ways to reduce the amount of pavement related to bikes or even motor vehicles to bring down some of the costs related to how much surface and really how much pavement we have to maintain? Get it? I would say that that's a component of our planning. I think certainly we could hear more from the community on that. I would say we know that the roadways are heavily underparked throughout the community, heavily underparked. So other than like downtown and specific areas, we have a lot of roadways that are wide that allow for parking on the street, and they're heavily underparked. So I think when we get into the areas, I think we can think creatively about it, and I think, you know, some of the, like the Roosevelt is a good example of, you know, underutilized parking that was on both sides and utilize it. So if you, I mean, I think if you drive around the community and you look in the neighborhoods, you can see that we have wide roadways that do accommodate residents and visitors, but there's parking really needed on both sides of the street. So I think that's something that we can think about, and I think we probably need to do more planning on the bikeways and maybe like thinking about that conversion, but I think those would be some more community conversations about that. Go ahead. Yep, right here in front. Yep.
Yeah, okay, when I ride on, like say, Woodley from Spring Creek to Prairie, and along the golf course there's that paved trail. I like to ride on that. Pedestrians seem fine with it, and I even ask some of them if that's all right. I'm Maple. Why you couldn't leave it the way it was and pave over or tear up the sidewalk, make it 10 feet wide, and use that for pedestrians and bicycles, and leave the street alone.
So the question was, the kind of out by Prairie, out to Spring Creek Road, Woodley, he likes the trail that's on Woodley. So then on Maple Street, how come on Maple Street, we couldn't, just take the sidewalk out and build like a 10-foot trail there and not do something in the roadway? And it really was evaluated. I think there's boulevard trees there. There's all those trees that are along Maple, when we had to widen it, would have had to come out in order to build, to put that trail in. So I think there's a balance of our urban forest and tree removal, and then retrofitting our streets and utilizing our streets. Go ahead.
Well, like, thinking about how much, like, construction has just, like, blown up, has the city ever, like, thought about, like, getting together with any other municipalities to create, like, an in-house construction firm?
So the question is, has the city thought about joining other cities just due to the cost to create like an in-house construction firm? I would say there are some joint powers agreements that are going on. So in Dakota County, a bunch of the cities get together and they do joint seal coating and striping. And we've looked at joining that, or we've evaluated that perspective. But our pricing that we're receiving when we're getting our quotes from our contractors have been as good or better than what they're getting in the county. So we are looking at that. They're not doing full reconstruction, it's more minor maintenance. So I'm not aware of communities doing that. I'd say probably the most unique community that is probably doing something is Hastings. Obviously they have, we did a street and park department study, but they have way more staff than we do. But they do some small paving, some small overlays in certain parts of their community that they've taken on. They've bought the equipment, they've done that, so they do that a little bit every year. I think with that, I want to thank everybody for coming here this evening. We will be out in the cafeteria to answer any questions that you may have. Again, thank you for coming this evening.
And just to piggyback on that, there is more comment cards out in the lower cafeteria where we're going to be talking with you guys about individual projects. If your question that you had here didn't get answered, again, there's more cards out there. Please fill those cards out with those questions and drop them in that box out there, and we'll do our best to get back to you on those.